hearing from Dan Steingart. He is the co-director of the Columbia Electrochemical Energy Center, and particularly his group studies the systematic behaviors of material deposition, conversion, and dissolution in electrochemical reactors with a focus on energy storage devices. Currently, he's looking at how to exploit traditional failure mechanisms and unwanted interactions in batteries, turning unwanted behaviors into beneficial mechanisms. So very excited, looking forward to what you have to share with us today, Dan. Thank you. Let's welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John and Suzanne and Julie for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. You'll notice a disambiguation from the original title. It was innovation addiction, and I wanted to be specific here. I wanted to speak about a specific thread of innovation addiction, which is moonshot addiction, which I grew up on, and it's why I got a PhD, and it's why I became a professor. And then a few years ago, I realized I was addicted and had to break the addiction if I wanted to improve the fate of batteries in the U.S., right? So this is controversial. This is meant to encourage you to throw tomatoes at me during the questions. So please do line them up. I am not going to be speaking too much about the research that I do. I'm biased here. I'm biased in my beliefs in this area. A number of companies have spun out of my lab, and I'm involved with a couple of other companies that are looking to scale batteries and electrochemical technology. So take that as a bias, but also take that as some modicum of experience of why this Ivy League professor should be telling you anything about manufacturing when I've not been responsible for the warranty of any product ever, right? It's easy for me to get up here and say this is what manufacturing should be when I've taken the easy way out. Those who can do, those who can't teach. Why are batteries hard? I've been telling this joke for 15 years now. I think it's time to retire it, and you'll see why after this talk. Leo Tolstoy is the original battery philosopher, and most of you don't know this, but Anna Karenina was really about a battery, right? The first line in a book, all happy families are like each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And for those of you that have gray hair like me and have done anything in batteries ever, you know that there's just inherent trade-offs to how we design and choose batteries for different applications. We can't have everything at once. And the second famous quote from the book, if you look for perfection, you'll never be content. Picking and manufacturing a battery is a fundamental exercise in satisfaction conditions, not maximization conditions. But people will tell you otherwise, and that's why this line is important. Anything is better than lies and deceit, right? So batteries, since the 19th century, have been known to be these difficult things to manufacture and difficult things to market. And this is the truth. So here's an actual battery historian. This is Thomas Edison in 1883. The storage battery is, in my opinion, a catchpenny, a sensation, a mechanism for swindling the public by stock companies. 1883. Just as soon as a man gets working on the secondary battery, it brings out his latent capacity for lying. Scientifically, storage is all right, but commercially about as absolutist failures one can imagine. Now, I learned about this quote about halfway into my tenure case, and I said, "Well, I guess we got to push through this." And in 2024, if you follow battery specs, most are well underwater, right? So this is disturbingly prescient. Why are there so many compromises in batteries? I love talking about this. But this is not a conference about why batteries are so hard to design. Suffice it to say that the most important thing I learned about manufacturing in grad school was from the senior machinist at the shop at Berkeley, Steve, who said you can have something good, fast, and cheap, or cheap, pick 2 out of 3. And I took this idea of a triplet to heart. And whenever I saw a problem of satisfaction in a multivariate space, I would think about these triangles. But there weren't enough vertices on a triangle to capture all of the real constraints of a design space. And I can't think in 5 dimensions, so I just settled on a tetrahedron and forced everything to the corners of the tetrahedron. But this has actually worked out really well for my small brain for thinking about what we have to do. We want to have high power density. This means we want to have a very fast charge. We want to have a high energy density. This means we want to have the car go long, go far. We want it to be really, really cheap, and we want it to last a long time. And before 2010, there was a different battery if you wanted to do these different things. And if you dare try to go in the middle, well, you were either a fool or a liar. It was really, really difficult. And so I finished grad school. I was very lucky for City College to give me my first faculty position. ARPA-E saw these couples and said, we need to invent a whole new part of the Department of Energy to break these couples, disrupt, disrupt, disrupt. But then this happened. The cost of a lithium-ion battery dropped from over, if I walk this way, it's over $1,000 per kilowatt hour at a cell level in 2008 when I started my career. And now, if I walk this way and I added this, and I want to be clear, like this is my data, it's not the good Bloomberg data, that's why it's Comic Sans. It's $50 per kilowatt hour coming out of China now for lithium iron phosphate cells. This is remarkably cheap prices for cells. This is 1/2 the cost of the first hard ARPA-E target for batteries that didn't have to perform nearly as well as an EV battery does in the GRIDS program. And I was a lucky beneficiary of the GRIDS program. So now, is it the fortunate tetrahedron? It looks like lithium-ion batteries driven by lithium iron phosphate, which was first commercialized by A123, which came from this storied institution by Yetming Cheng, seems to be the building block, the Lego, the silicon of electrification. It's not to say there won't be other chemistries, but this is the one to beat. If your battery does not beat LFP, not just on one, this is why it's so hard, not just on one of those vertices, but on all of them, it's hard to justify using that chemistry. So what did the US bet in 2010? The incumbent process is limited by things that seem too hard to fix. So let's invest this in very different ways of manufacturing and designing batteries to solve this problem, right? That was the fundamental bet of these moonshots that were driven by Stephen Chu at the time. And the zeitgeist in the US agreed with it. And I, freebased the Kool-Aid and said, yes, let's go. This is exciting. I want to do this. This is what I signed up for. So what is this radically different battery? This is all of the key components in a battery. This is what it was made of in 2010. This is what it's made of now. I won't bore you with the difference in the details because they're pretty minor. I have a slightly different composition of nickel, manganese, and cobalt. I'm a little bit thicker. I've added this cool stuff called lithium FSI. My separators are a little bit thinner. But notice that this all seems horribly evolutionary. This does not feel like disruption. So how did we go down an order of magnitude in cost in 14 years? Well, it must be the manufacturing. So let's look at how a battery was manufactured and what the design of the actual structure was. In 2010, it was slot die coated and then mixed with a planetary mixer, and the separator was Z-folded or stacked, and an electrolyte was added in a dry room, and the formation protocol, super duper secret, that's the technical term. And in 2024, it's exactly the same way. And the battery, this is from a paper, right? Just to show that I'm not lying to you, because I told you that all battery people are liars. I'm not lying to you. This is from a paper in 2002 saying, this is what a lithium-ion battery looks like. This is the structure. This is the layer-wise structure we want. This is from a teardown of a battery in 2022. It's exactly the same. So what happened? This is a manufacturing audience. What is this relationship? It's a learning curve. It's a demand-driven learning curve, right? So this is Wright's law. Basically, you know, the often misquoted line from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. The line is really, if you build it, he will come, but it doesn't play as well. So we're going to say, if you build it, they will come. As more and more lithium-ion batteries raced into the market, they got much, much cheaper. Now, what drove the demand? A single car requires on the order of 8,000 cell phone battery equivalents, and it uses exactly that chemistry in a very similar form factor. So one car drives up your demand per user by a factor of 8,000. Boom, you begin to ride Wright's curve just by motivating EVs. This is obvious in hindsight, but it wasn't obvious to anyone who was making important decisions in the US in 2005. Fight me on this, but I was there and I did not hear anyone screaming it, except for the 8 to 20 people that were pushing it at Tesla at the time. So why wasn't this anticipated? Why wasn't this foreseen? Let's call it purity challenges. I won't go into the details, I'm happy to afterwards, but everything in a battery has to be just so. The original title, which Suzanne told me to change, was Dog Food Prices for Diamond Quality. Why we didn't think we can do this is that we need 5 nines across so many different vectors, across atmospheric vectors when we're manufacturing, across mechanical tolerances, across chemical tolerances. It just didn't seem possible. And it didn't seem possible because the margins were going to be miserable from day one. A postdoc of mine runs this incredible Substack. You should all subscribe to it. It's called Intercalation Station. Dr. Andrew Wang is the founder and runner of it. And he makes these wonderful infographics and digest of the battery industry. On a car ride to ARPA-E a couple years ago, I said, hey, Andrew, how much money are we allowed to make if we're a battery company, no matter what we do? And statistically, the answer is about 5% if we're only selling cells. And if we're selling something downstream of the cells, well, then we get to really capture value. But because cells are at the scales we have to sell them to justify these Wright's law curves, they're fighting with gasoline, they're fighting with natural gas. These are already commodities that are too cheap where the externalities aren't properly priced. So despite all of our technological innovation and getting better at manufacturing, if we want to sell them in a like-for-like application, we have to squeeze our margins to the bone. And I was speaking over lunch with some folks about the $7,500 tax credits. Those tax credits drove the demand that help firm up Wright's law. At least that's my thesis here. So are we done? No, we're not close to done, and we have to get much better at manufacturing. And all of the tools we heard about this morning to make manufacturing better have to be instantiated while maintaining these 5% margins. One is because of safety. We've seen twice in the last decade when we've moved too fast around the corners of the tetrahedron and we've tried to increase power density and energy density too much, a device which is very energy dense and a device that is very power dense, if incorrectly used or correctly used, depending on how nefarious you are, is a bomb, right? And so the more energy we put in and the faster we ask it to charge or discharge, the more energy can come out faster, and it's eventually going to show up as heat. And this is exactly what happened with manufacturing defects. And it was the same sort of manufacturing defect that happened in the Galaxy fires and then a few years later in the Bolt fires. Both billion-dollar-plus recalls. We're also not done because we need batteries to be even cheaper. And this is where things get a little bit mushy. And what I mean by mushy is that this is where you have to get people who work in battery factories drunk to get this sort of information. But the scrap rate, right, only about 70 to 80% of the material that goes into a battery plant comes out as useful battery. The rest now is propping up the battery recycling industry, right? So the US battery recycling industry exists for the next 5 years or so purely on manufacturing scrap. There is not enough EV coming offline, which is great. It's a testament to this, the power of EVs, or the stability of EV batteries, to justify the scale of plants we're eventually going to need. But at the same time, it's a catch-22 because the scrap is certainly unacceptable. And the less scrap we have coming out, the cheaper the battery can be to begin with. So here's where I'm going to get controversial. Here's where I want you to take the knives out. Challenge me on this. The Loan Program Office, which is about scaling capital, is asking in one of its programs under Title 17, technology that has only been recently developed, discovered, or learned, or involves or constitutes one or more meaningful, important improvements or productivity value in comparison to commercial technologies used in the United States. So this is a little bit of this is the moonshot addiction. This is not invented here as applied towards things that are very low on the TRL level ladder. And just to point it out, the LPO exists to fund things in this TRL 6 range, but these two lines are fundamentally asking for things that are between TRL 3 and TRL 4. Right? There's just a capital mismatch, in my opinion, in what this is asking for. Now, on the other hand, when you take this away and we look at what China is doing, this is, and I'm going to butcher the name, Huayou Cobalt in Guangxi. This is a factory that will make over 1 million tons of cathode material by the end of 2025 if it finishes completion. That is enough to supply the entire world's cathode needs, not just China's cathode needs. This one factory can supply the entire world's cathode needs, just about, plus or minus 10%. So the amount of capital that has been poured in China in the if we build it, they will come strategy has been enormous. And what is happening here has no Title 17 type restriction whatsoever. And here's the result, right? So the result to date is it is not surprising that as we go from everything downstream of mining, and material processing accounts for refining, China is just dominant. Now, there's a duality here. This is great. These batteries are cheap. We can start electrification tomorrow. These batteries work really well. But China controls the supply in a level that is seen by many as unacceptable. So how do we create a strategic reserve, and how do we create bankability for a fundamental set of products? And really everything from this point left is limited to IRRs between 5 and 10% in an area where there's zero room for technical risk and decreasing room for execution risk. With interest rates where they are now, it just doesn't make any sense. Yet it's strategically important. So we have a bit of a knot here, and I don't know how to moonshot our way out of this, right? I don't think going down the TRL ladder to lower level technologies gets us out of this, because the fundamental margin pressures are such that it still has to be 5%. We're still competing with very stiff incumbents without having the right externalities priced in. So what's the future? I think that we don't have a significant shift in the way that we're making batteries, and I'm happy to chat offline about how batteries are made and what new advances can come on. But I think that this 5% margin is pretty stiff. I'm biased in this. I have a couple of companies that do this, but I think that QA/QC is just absolutely crucial. It's crucial for getting past certain adoption barriers. People are very scared battery fires. I don't think this is completely rational, but it's quite real, it's quite evident. In New York City, there have been a number of just completely unacceptable fires, and the root cause analysis hasn't been completed yet. So QA/QC along the entire chain. Again, these are little bombs, if not used correctly, no matter what they're made out of. I think it's important, though, at this moment that we're deciding to deploy many billions, trillions of dollars of capital ultimately to think about how we are targeting this growth and whether or not batteries are the right vehicle for moonshots or moonshots are the right construct for thinking about battery innovation. So I really appreciate your time. I want your tomatoes. Let me have it, and thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I know that one solution to the safety issue is a growing use of capacitator for wireless transmission of electricity. What can you offer and comment as to the future of this solution? I know that it's limited. It's being used now mainly for logistical robots.
Yeah. So two answers there. One is that any device that can store a lot of energy, the amount of energy we need, the energy density we need, and the power density we need is a safety concern, right? Regardless of the mechanism it uses to store the energy. Specifically, capacitors have a challenge getting anywhere near the energy density to displace batteries. So there's a fundamental challenge that people have been pushing for, and when I was a much younger man, there were exciting efforts trying to use things like barium titanate to get to exceptional energy densities. Those haven't materialized. There are certain benefits to the construction materials in a capacitor. If it's a truly solid-state capacitor, and they're now solid-state batteries that have the same benefits, there's less inherently flammable material in it. There's less energetically flammable material in it. One of the great ironies of a current lithium-ion battery is that the most flammable thing in the system is the thing that's not supposed to give you any energy. It's the electrolyte. The electrolyte accounts for 70% of the caloric value of the battery, meaning that when a battery catches fire, it burns with 2.5 times the heat that the electrodes alone will give you if they discharge. So you save a little bit there, but it's only 2.5 times. We still have to be very careful in the manufacturing aspects here. Capacitors, on the other hand, from manufacturing tolerances, have even harder challenges than batteries, in my opinion, because in order to get energy densities that are anywhere close, you have to go to hundreds or thousands of volts. And maintaining the ability to resist dielectric breakdown over the area that's required in these systems. Right? So you need micron level distances between the two electrodes over meters. That's a 10 million to 1 aspect ratio. If you have dielectric breakdown that's not properly accounted for, that can spark. And if you have spark and a lot of energy around, something will eventually catch fire. So that's a long answer. I don't think capacitors are a silver bullet. I think what's magic, again, back to this, is that rather than looking for a brand new technology, what we've seen in lithium-ion batteries, that they can be made safer through just traditional learning curves and, frankly, boring physical chemistry, what would be considered by RPE standards as boring physical chemistry. But now, I'm going to be mean, nothing in the DOE is really focused directly on the safety problem now. It's ancillary, but it's not either seen as disruptive enough or enough fundamental research to get the kind of funding we see here. That's not the case in Germany. It's not the case in China. It's not the case in Korea. It's not the case in Japan.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, so LFP's gone a long way in safety by removing oxygen generation from abuse. Do you think that solid-state electrolyte could be the next moonshot? Because solid-state electrolyte would remove what you call the last flammable thing from the cell. It would also enable a new generation of cell construction,
Yep.
opening up bipolar cell design.
Yep.
And is that a big enough leap forward?
Yeah, I think so. Solid state is certainly interesting for addressing that problem. The problem with solid state batteries is that they don't naturally give you these easy interfaces that liquid electrolytes give you, and the current distributions in a real solid state system are poorly understood. I saw Cole Fincher here, whose PhD is all about these problems, so he knows far more about this than I ever will. At the same time, liquids don't have to be inherently flammable, right? So one can use a solvent like trimethyl phosphate, which is actually flame retardant, and that's been shown to be a decent battery electrolyte. It's not as good as ethylene carbonate, so we don't use it. It doesn't form the same stable SEI yet. So again, I want to caution from moving so quickly to a system that is lower on the TRL too quickly. I think solid state systems have come a long way, and they've been hastened by folding into standard manufacturing process, the same slot die coating, the same mixing. When it can be cast like an electrode, then it's fair game, but it has to have like-for-like performance before we even think about the safety aspects. Yeah, so unlocking the bipolar cell is an interesting idea. I don't know how to do it. I'm trying to think about the construction where I can heal those interfaces. Unlocking the bipolar cell increases the energy density, right? So it gets you to, something like 60 to 70% of the fuel basis energy density versus the 30 to 40% fuel basis energy density we're getting now. It would be a huge deal. People have been selling it as a higher TRL thing than it's been for longer than I've been at this job. The guy who I bought most of his equipment because his company failed, his email was bipolarbat@aol.com. And so I'm just scarred by people telling me for 30 years that it needs to be the next step. I think if solid state electrolytes can enable it and it's proven and the manufacturing process works with traditional coaters at 100 meters per minute or whatever they have to be, absolutely. But I would have those threshold conditions before I got really excited by it.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. I have the question, do you think that's possible for the US, like bridging this gap, like starting battery cell manufacturing? Like, I know, like Europe is already a little bit doing stuff over there.
Yep.
The US started maybe a little bit later, but also like universities are starting to do more research the last decades into this field. But technically, do we have enough experts in the countries, like in the US, to build up like battery cell manufacturing like the
Yeah.
China is
Understood.
doing, or like is it smart for the automotive companies to building up their own factory, or should they cooperate with other companies who are just focusing on?
Yeah, so I'm going to say yes. So I right now in 2020, if we need batteries next year, no. If we want the batteries by 2028, probably not. Not enough of them. Strategically is an important yes. So I looked to my friends at the Columbia Center for Global Energy Policy, CGEP, and the director, Jason Bordoff, says, look, when OPEC has 15 to 20% of the oil supply, they can create serious pain. China has 70% of the battery supply now. So that is untenable long term. The oversupply in China will eventually go away. And as my friends in economics like to say, we don't want to have them foreclose on our ability to use their cells. At the same time, do we delay the upcoming electrification until we can do it internally? I don't think so. I think we have the expertise. We certainly have the PhDs and the undergraduates that can execute this stuff. What we don't have is the margins, right? It's just a very hard thing to bank on given current interest rates and what these costs have to be. So long term, yes, we have to do it. And we have to figure out how to do it with both government vehicles and the right private financing. But I don't see it as a labor problem. I don't see it as a technology problem. Oh, I have to go. Okay, thank you.